I'm going to talk a little bit about how to build a multi-million-dollar law practice. It sounds a bit conceited to say that, but that's literally what I did. I started out with nothing, and over the years built a very large practice. Became an equity partner at Reed Smith. Was on the EC, office managing partner, practice group leader, and all that kind of stuff. And I did it through a very specific process that I adopted many years ago, and I'd like to take you through that process, and then also give you some tips and little things you can do that you might want to consider going forward. The key, however, is, if I can get this to work, is to keep calm. This is not rocket science. In fact, it's really far more simple than you actually think it is. And we're going to talk about 4 different things in our agenda. We're going to start with programming your brain, something that you might find interesting. Then a 6-step plan, tips and tricks, and some business tools that you can use to ensure your success. You may not know it, but you are already trained to be a business planner. Law schools don't have any specific courses in it, but in your day-to-day practice, you do all the things that business planning requires. You read, you analyze, you brief, you plan, you argue, you execute, and you debrief. This is what you do every day for clients. What I'm suggesting is that you start doing it for yourself as well. So why, though, do we need to put the plan in writing? A lot of people will, over the years, have said to me, I have a plan. I know what I'm going to do. I know I'm going to see so and so. I know what my next plan is going to be, or whatever it is, but I just need it in my head. I don't need it in writing. And here's why that's not true. This is about programming your brain. This is, I said earlier, it's not rocket science, it's neuroscience. There was a really interesting article about 8 years ago in Forbes where some neuroscientists did some studies to establish why it's so important for you to put your business plans and your goals in writing in order for that to be achievable. It happens at 3 levels: the generation effect, external storage, and encoding. The generation effect that basically says that if you write something, you have a tendency to remember it more than if you read something. So where you're generating it yourself by writing it down on paper or wherever it might be, you have a much higher probability of achieving whatever that goal is than reading it elsewhere, having other people tell you what your goals should be. The external storage effect is when you're looking at it. The best analogy I can use for this is the list that was on your refrigerator door of the things you had to do, the chores you had to achieve on a given day. The way your brain works is each morning when you go to open your refrigerator and it sees that list, your brain is saying to yourself subconsciously, will you please get this done? I no longer want to store this. I want to get it off of my plate, so get it done. So it's subconsciously telling your brain to do its job, for you to do your job and do what's on that reminder sheet. So that's why it's so important to have that external storage aspect of it. And that's the written plan itself. Then what happens is the most important thing of all is the encoding. This is an actual biological process where our brain takes things in and decides whether it's something that should be stored or discarded. When it reads something, it tends to put that into storage right away because it's reading it, it's seeing it. And if you have that generation effect where it also knows you wrote it, it's going to store it even more prevalently within your brain. This is science. This is not some voodoo kind of thing. So by programming your brain and doing it a written plan and doing some of the things I'm suggesting in this presentation, you will have a much better probability of succeeding in your goals than if you don't. So it's time for everyone to start with a fresh written plan. And you do that with 6 steps, what I call a 6-step plan. And if you follow these, I think you'll find a way to get this done with some enjoyment and not a whole lot of pain and extra time devoted to it. The first is the SWOT analysis. This is something that, if any of you who went to business school or have an MBA in addition to your Juris Doctorate degree, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's taught at Harvard, Wharton, Stanford. When I give this lecture at other places in the world, I'll put up other business schools from Europe or elsewhere, and they all teach this. SWOT analysis is as old as dirt. And it's basically breaking down the environment around you into your strengths, your opportunities, your weaknesses, and your threats. This is a very personalized thing that you want to do. That you want to really take a deep dive into yourself before you start any kind of business planning. Because if you don't understand yourself, if you don't understand your strengths, your opportunities, your weaknesses, and your threats, you really can't create a legitimate and achievable business plan. The strengths are, what it is about you that gives you an advantage. And strengths are easy to list. Lawyers have great egos. We love to tell everybody, and we like to think about how wonderful we are. So we can write down our strengths pretty easily. But the key here is to write down all of your strengths, as many as you can think of. To write them all down so that you got it written down. And again, you're programming your brain to be aware of these things. Your weaknesses are the skills that you lack that hold you back. These are more difficult to admit. But if you're very honest with yourself, particularly in the earlier years of your career, you'll see quite a few weaknesses that you might have, or you might look at others and see where they have strengths and you don't share those strengths. Then that becomes a weakness on your part. In business planning, it's critical that you put down as many of your weaknesses as you can, because if you don't put them down, you're not going to change them. Or if you try to change them, you're not going to have the likelihood of success as much as if you write them down. Your opportunities are what are the things that are out there that you can take advantage of. And there's a lot of them. They're internal opportunities within the firm, and they're external opportunities outside the firm to make yourself a better lawyer, to make yourself a better business producer. Write those down so that you're, again, generating it, and you're encoding and with external aspects, you're programming your brain. So that's why that's so important to write down and do the SWOT analysis in that regard. The threats are where third-party influences exist over which you have little or no control. Some are quite obvious. The next election cycle may influence your practice. The pandemic impacted many of our practices, and there were people and practices during the pandemic that actually thrived, and we did better. In fact, the main year of the pandemic was one of the best years Reed Smith ever had. So sometimes these threats can also turn themselves into weakness, into opportunities, and those opportunities can turn themselves into strengths. So these don't act in a vacuum, each separate from the other. Each of them is something that all intertwines and works together when you're doing business planning, so that you can use those threats and turn them into opportunities, and opportunities into strengths, weaknesses into opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why it's so important to be very, very transparent and very complete in doing your SWOT analysis. It shouldn't be something that's easy to do. It should take your time and be very introspective. Next after you've done your SWOT analysis, that's when you set your goals. Not too many goals, 5, 6, 7, maybe for the year. There are some folks who talk about business planning in 5-year and 10-year increments. I think that's fine for institutions and organizations, not for people. I like to take on goals as an individual that are biteable size. That's a year. So you set your goals on what you want to accomplish in a specific year. So those are the things that you want to do to make yourself a better lawyer and a better business producer. Billable hours, the working attorney receipts, utilization rates, and realization are goals that are set for you by others. And they're important. I'm not denying that they're not important. In fact, they're critical to your advancement in the firm and your compensation. But you want to add more. You want to be more than just someone who achieves goals set for you by others. You want to set your own to better yourself. They should be a combination, and you've heard this before, there should be a combination of what is attainable and what is a reasonable stretch. The ratio ought to be, for every 3 or 4 very attainable goals, you might have 1 or 2 that are reaches. Don't overreach. Try to stay within your bounds, because the important thing is you've got to build up a momentum. If you do business planning properly, you're going to do this year in, year out. So that in order for you to want to do that, to be motivated, for your brain to be programmed to saying, yes, this is a good exercise for me because I'm achieving this as I'm going along, you need to make sure that your goals are for the most part those things that are attainable. And don't push too much on overreaching. Examples of what there might be, and each of these examples are just simple lists. They're for you, the examples may be very different and maybe very specific. But to improve your use in social media, being a thought leader, an influencer, focus on cross-marketing, publish, deepen my relationship with fill in the blank. It could be a partner, could be a client, it could be anybody. Delegate work. Delegating work is a critical part of advancing. That's a goal that I think everyone should have. By delegating work, particularly now you're in a position where you can do so as counsel or FSP. Delegating work increases your team. Increasing your team, I guarantee you, increases your revenue. So delegating can be a very important thing. I used to keep track of how many people I delegated work to within the clients and the matters that I handled. And in one year, I hit the high point I hit was over 300. Over 300 lawyers in the firm worked on my matters, whether it might have been 1/10 of an hour, it might have been 1,000 hours. But by increasing that pool of people to whom I delegated, I can guarantee you my revenue went up substantially. Improve your rankings with all the services that are out there. I hate those things, but unfortunately, there's something we need to focus on. Or be promoted. Your FS go from counsel to FSP to equity. Those are examples of goals that are what you want to achieve. But you may have a like entirely different list, but establish the goals you want to achieve. Then the most important aspect, the next aspect that is often overlooked or not seriously considered are the tactics. Tactics are the what you are going to do, when you are going to do it, where you are going to do it, how you are going to do it, who you need to help you do it, and why it supports your goals. Each of those is steps towards achieving the goal. Someone once said to me in the visual I use here, it says who is a person or animal. Someone said, "What do you mean animal?" Well, the anecdote came up where I had a friend of mine who actually got business because she would walk her dog in the dog park where she knew other people in New York were business executives with their dogs, and she'd get into conversations. It was because of a dog that she was able to develop business. So be open to all sorts of ideas on how you can proceed to build your business. The more tactics or tasks you list for each of your goals, and the more details associated with each one of them, will increase substantially the odds of you achieving success. That is critical to success is many tactics for each goal. So for example, if your goal is to build a better relationship with the general counsel of a client, if you simply put as your tactic, I'm going to call him, that is one tactic, as opposed to I'm going to call him once a month. I'm going to take him out to lunch 3 times this year. I'm going to send him a note 4 times this year. I'm going to do this, that, or the other thing throughout the entire year. You map it out through the entire year. When I did my business plans, when I was an equity partner at Reed Smith, I knew in January who I would see and what I might be doing in December. Now that may change over the course of the year, but I had it mapped out with tactics, at least 6 or 7 tactics for every single goal I had. And by the end of the year, those tactics for each of those goals would sometimes increase to 20 or 25 tactics for each of those goals as it developed over the year. Tactics is where you win. Tactics is where you execute your plan with individuals and move forward in achieving those goals. The more you have, the more likely you're going to do it. Step 4 is to create a schedule to review and update the plan. Why is that important? If you recall what I said earlier, you're trying to program your brain. So you're trying to get your brain to understand that this is very important to achieve these things and move this forward. You do that by setting up a schedule to review and update your plan. The person I reviewed it with all the time was my EA, Nancy Schuline, who was my EA for more than 20 years. She was the person who would sit down with me. We would go over it. We would assign her things that she needed to do, and she would make sure that I connected with other people who were going to help me achieve other tactics that were within my goals. So that's very important to do that. Then over the course of the year, continue to build your network of contacts. This is critical to build contacts, and it's a lot easier to do than you think. Every time you meet somebody, every time you encounter someone at a conference or wherever it might be, start building them into your contacts. When I retired from Reed Smith, my Outlook had almost 4,000 contacts in it. Many of them were probably dead, but I had accumulated it over the years. My challenge was that when I downloaded it off the firm server onto my own server, somehow it ballooned into 27,000 contacts. So I'm still trying to work that through. I'm not technically proficient, but build your network as large as you can. And here's the critical thing: at the year's end, grade yourself. See how you did. And if you've got enough tactics and you've executed enough of them, you're going to have a pretty good grade. You're going to feel that you've achieved something, and then do it again. Revise your SWOT analysis, adopt another plan. Do this year in, year out, and you will succeed. That's been proven thousands of times in corporate America, in classic business planning. That's what works. And I assure you that if you do it, it'll work for you. It worked for me. And if it worked for me, I guarantee it can work for you. So SWOT, Strategic goals, tactics, schedule, build your network, review, reflect, and plan. Those are the elements. Those are the 6 steps that I think will give you the success. And while lots of people laugh at what Yogi Berra said and all these yogiisms, he did say one thing, at least one thing, many things that were really very, very cogent. Without a plan, even the most brilliant business can get lost. You need to have goals, create milestones, and have a strategy in place to set yourself up for success. That's Yogi Berra, and you should take his words to heart. He was a very, very smart man. If you're having trouble trying to figure out, how to take the first step, thanks to AI, something that scares the hell out of me as a writer, but nonetheless, AI gives you some instruments and way, assists you in doing so. These are some examples. Up Metrics, Venture Kit, 15-minute business plan. Grammarly has a business AI generator, a plan generator. So you can use these to start off. But again, make sure you begin with that SWOT analysis before you jump into any of these planning things. Forgetting that SWOT analysis, you're going to get lost in business planning. And it's going to look like something generic as opposed to something very geared and organized for you. Okay, so that's sort of the guts of how you do your business plan, the steps to success. Now let me get into some of the tips and tricks I learned over the years that I think proved good for me and helped me build a pretty significant book of business. First is not seeing or failing to see what is known as the blinding glimpse of the obvious. That was a phrase that was coined by Harvey Mackay, a business writer, many years ago. It's what you see something that somebody else achieves, and you say to yourself, I should have seen that. Why did I miss that? How did I possibly miss that? Well, those are the things that people who are very observant and who kind of look for things and figure these things out, that's where they succeed and you fail. So you need to observe. You need to figure out how to see what is obvious in front of you that you would otherwise miss. Let me give you an example, a little test for you. These logos were designed by folks who intentionally put subliminal messages inside those logos. I asked people to take a look at those and see if they can tell where those subliminal messages are in each of these logos. For example, did you see the arrow in the FedEx logo that is meant to subliminally tell you that they move forward? Or the New York skyline in the Bronx Zoo? Or the child looking up at its mother in the Hope for African Children initiative? Or that Amazon will take you from A to Z? These were all intentional things that observant people can see. This is called the OODA loop. You observe, you orient, you decide, and you act. In business planning, that's a critical element that you need to learn. You need to learn to observe, then to orient yourself, then to decide what to do, and then to act. If there's one thing that I would say to every lawyer, it's shut up and listen. We're so geared to interrupt. We're so geared and educated to think we have a solution before we hear all the facts. Great lawyers and great advocates and great business developers are people who listen more than they talk. So when you're talking to a client and they're telling you about an issue, don't jump in quickly with, hey, I can solve that, or whatever you might think you can do for them. Ask them to tell you more, elicit more and more from them so you observe more and more. By doing so, you will see the blinding glimpse of the obvious more often than not. And you'll be able to do a much better job of not only the job of being a lawyer for that person, but also giving them the impression that you care about them. Because just as much as you program your brain, you can program the brain of your clients. You can program the client to think well of you. Think about why you like people. You like people because you perceive they like you. So you have to, in developing business with clients, give them the perception, whether it's true or not is up to you, but give them the perception that you care about them. And the way you do that is to listen to them, to elicit from them as much of their personal lives as you possibly can without looking as though you're stalking them. The more you do that, the more they will see you as a resource, a valuable person, as someone who they care about, and someone with whom they want to do business. I say to people, learn the person before you ask for the check. Another is branding. If you're not a brand, you're a commodity. And let's face it, lawyers are commodities. As good as you may think you are, I guarantee you there's a lawyer out there who's just as good. And maybe there's one out there that's better. There are plenty of lawyers, plenty of great law firms. And while Reed Smith and other law firms like Reed Smith have fantastic lawyers, do terrific work. It is fungible, folks. There is a difference. So what makes a difference in the marketplace outside of law in the commercial marketplace is branding. So what is a brand? A brand is a set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that taken together account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. Let's translate that. What is a brand in law? Is a set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationship that taken together account for a client's decision to use you over another lawyer. So what are those expectations, those memories, those stories, those relationships? It's you. It's picturing you. It's creating you so that they know in your mind, in their minds, who you are. And you're not just another lawyer and another fungible firm in whatever you do. So who are you? What makes you memorable as a person? What's in your firm bio? For example, I would love all of you to go to your firm bio and take a look at the first two sentences in there. If it says Johnny Jones, the last time I used Joe McGuire, I used Joe again. Joe McGuire is a counsel in the entertainment and media law group and has 25 years experience. I could take Joe's name out and put everybody else in there. Say something in the beginning of your bio on the firm website that talks about you beyond what is written for you by others. Well, many of you know Law 360 is a publication. They have the Hall of Fame. Now, it's probably a bunch of BS as far as I'm concerned, but for whatever reason, they put me in the Hall of Fame for advertising law. So my bio on the firm when it was up there started out, Douglas Wood is in the Hall of Fame, Law 360 Hall of Fame for advertising law. Now, there are probably maybe a dozen people who could say that, but that's something that captures and says something about me that is beyond just being a good lawyer, or has evidence of something that I might have achieved. So use every opportunity you can to build your brand and be proactive about it. When you do something well, get it posted on our space. Get it out there. Figure out ways to push your name out there in ways that show that you're beyond just the ordinary. In the end, you need to establish what's known in marketing as unique selling proposition. What is it about you that is unique when selling that the consumer, the client in our world is going to want to use instead of the other lawyer down the street? Networking. Networking is a critical part of building your business. I talked about it earlier. Much of this is a blinding glimpse of the obvious as well. You're going to say, I know that, Doug. But my question to you, even though you know it, is whether or not you do it. There's lots of talk, and the question is whether you walk. And networking is one of the things that is really critical. So what I do, and I hate networking. Personally, I hate networking. I can't stand going into a room where I don't know people and trying to walk up to somebody and say, hi, whatever. I mean, it's just like, I hate the game. So what I do is I turn it into a little bit of a game. So I will say to myself, okay, when I'm going to go into that conference or that networking event, whatever it is, I've succeeded if I walk out of there with 5 business cards and get to know a little bit about 5 people. So make it into a more enjoyable game rather than just walk in there and blindly and not know what you're going to do. If you can get a list of the people who are attending beforehand, all the better. If you can learn something about them, even better, so that you have a conversation. And what are you going to do in that conversation? Are you going to tell them first about yourself? No. You're going to do everything you can to elicit about them so that they think you care about them. They don't need to know that really the only reason you're doing that is to get their business. But they need to understand, at least to think, that you care about what they do. The other thing is, and this is a great quote, there's no better way to grow as a person than to do something you hate every day. And that's true in business. What the things about business that you hate are the ones you need to do every day. And networking for me was one of them. I hated it. But every opportunity that I had to do it, I went and did it, and played with my game that I talked about, and tried to come out a little bit, with 1 or 2 things each time. And then I said, okay, I done it. I done what I hated. And I ultimately, it will help me be successful. The first impression, obviously, when you're networking is very important. And you should have your elevator speech, but don't start with it. Never, ever start with elevator speeches. In fact, if I had to advise someone saying there's one thing you can ditch at your elevator speech, because first of all, it's the same thing all the time, and it's really not conversation. It doesn't invite in conversation. So be very careful with your elevator speech. You ask them about themselves before you tell them about you. Wait for them to invite you, if you're in the best of all worlds, to tell them who you are. And even when you do that, keep it brief and go back to asking them more about themselves. Try to elicit as much about the individual as you possibly can on those rare occasions when you have the opportunity to do so. And then you go back and you make sure you write it down. I'll show you where later. So, like, as I said earlier, you got to get to know the person before you get to know their checkbook. That's often missed. Imagine if someone walked up to you and said, "Hi, I'm Joe McGuire. I'm a partner at Reed Smith, and I'm one of the guys. I heard that you had a problem. I would really like to help you out with that." Person's going to be turned off immediately because you're solicited. You're nothing but a cheap salesman. As opposed to coming up, listening to the person because you know they had that problem, and you elicit a conversation where they start talking about it, then you find a way to slip in what you do. Again, it's all about getting them to initiate the conversation and to tell you more and more about themselves. So here's some business tools you can use along that journey. Here's the Outlook section. That's the one that Reed Smith has is on the left. The one on the right is other organizations use those. That big space is where you can put in as much data as you want to. Every single time you meet somebody, you should be entering in that space what you learned about them. So the next time they call you on the phone, you pull up their contact and you'll see that there's a birthday coming up, that they received an award at some point, that they're a Mets fan, God forbid, that they're whatever they are, that you can then inject in your conversation with them something that's non-business, something that's personal. Why are you doing that? Again, you're doing that because you want to program their brain to believe that you care about them beyond just their business. And the more you do that, the more their brain's going to be telling them, I like this person. You need to do business with this person. How many of you put any data in there? Put it in there. It's really important. LinkedIn is another tool that people miss opportunity time and time again. Don't just put a canned comment where it says, congrats, Joe, or don't just put that you liked something. That is a waste of time. Get into the conversation. You'll see where people, either you make a comment to the posting yourself about the individual who posted it, and again, in a way that's supportive and whatever you want to say, or even better, you get into sub-conversations because you can respond to a person who made a comment. So you get deeper and deeper into those conversations. You will engage in a discourse that will ultimately show your worth and show these individuals that you're someone that they ought to listen to because you've got something important to say. Again, if you're going to go into LinkedIn with anything other than getting into the conversation, you're wasting your time. So get into the conversation under the comments. That's critical. Another one that I love is Counsel. I know the firm is very much into Counsel. Counsel is a really great tool when used properly. What Counsel is, for those of you who don't know it, it's a social media platform where you can pull a quote out of an article that's been published on the internet, and then make a comment about it, and then post it on Counsel, so that your Counsel group sees what you think about what somebody else said. And that's a good brand building opportunity. And there's some folks in the firm who use Counsel extensively. The way I like to use Counsel was to find an article or something written by a client or a client prospect. I would pull out something they said in their article, and I would then support it by saying how smart I thought that was and what a good piece of advice it was or observation it was. Then I make sure they get it. They'll get it through the Counsel system. Again, what am I doing? I'm giving them the impression that I read about something that they wrote. I read something that they wrote, and that not only did I read it, I felt compelled to comment on it and be supportive to them. Again, their brain is going to say to them, I like that guy. The other thing is what I like to call old school tactics that are all too often missed as we move forward in this technological change that we're undergoing, particularly as AI is about to take over a lot of people's lives. Old school is something that gives you an opportunity to break out of the clutter. Some of the things I've done is I have personal note cards, and you see the little flying pig on there. One of my things I'm known for is my collection of pigs in my office. And in fact, I have these little plexiglass ones, you can see. You see this little plexiglass one? And what I used to do when I was in practice, if a client was being piggish about a matter, I would remind them of the adage from Wall Street that bulls get rich, bears get rich, and pigs get slaughtered. And I would give them one of those plastic pigs. that developed into all sorts of pigs in my office, and eventually it became my logo of a flying pig. But here's the point. When was the last time you got a personal note from somebody thanking you that is handwritten? You don't get that. You get an email, God forbid you get an e-card, or whatever it is you get. You don't get personal notes from people. But when you do, and those occasions when you can think of getting one, what do you think? You think very highly of the person who sent it to me because they took the time, old school time, to write down and mail you a personal note. I cannot tell you how often my clients would respond to me when I sent them personal notes of congratulations, thank yous, or whatever it was. They'd respond and they'd say, wow, thank you for the note. I don't get these things anymore. Obviously, you care about me. So that's an old school move that I think is worth its weight in gold. Another thing I did, I hate e-cards. I absolutely hate them. I understand if you want to send them, go ahead. They can go into the ether and they can go into the trash can of every client you send them to. Great, fine. I never sent out e-cards. If I was going to send out anything, I used to send out a short letter like you see up on the screen. Thanksgiving. That's a holiday. That's a non-denominational. No one can really hate that holiday. And I would send out a card, a little note like this on Thanksgiving, thanking them for their friendship and their work over the year. And then I would make a charitable contribution as well. At one point, I got this up to about maybe 300 or 400 people I was sending this to, and came up with the idea of sending out a CD rather than a charitable contribution. So I would find music of some performer that was obscure that I liked, and I would send them CDs. I would buy them in bulk, and I'd send them CDs. Obscure performer CDs are cheap. It got a groundswell of consistency to the point where when I stopped sending them, I would start getting emails from clients. Where's my CD? Where's my Thanksgiving CD? So I was programming their brains to expect something from me, to show that I care. So I would encourage you to think about finding ways to get out of the holiday clutter, whether you use Thanksgiving or some other holiday or whatever it is, or if you're gonna do something on the traditional holidays, consider the note card aspect of it rather than the e-card. The other is trade press. We all have to read the legal press. I mean, it's one of the things that are a burden on us in order to keep up on things. But I used to love to read the trade press, and particularly the comings and goings section, where it would tell you about executives who had come to the company, who were leaving the company, or whatever it was. I would always use those opportunities if I knew the person to congratulate them on the move with a note or whatever it might be. Or if I didn't know the person, but they were joining a client and they were in a position where they might be of interest or importance to me, I would write them a note saying, congratulations on joining this particular company. I'm one of their lawyers, nice to meet you, kind of thing. Again, you're building up that network, you're building up that base upon which you're going to draw business. The larger your network, you're guaranteed the larger your business. How about just calling them, saying, what's up? I mean, you just might send an email. I mean, we're so engaged in thinking that emails are the only way to really communicate with people because that's the new technology. And it's simple to do. You can send it to like 10 clients at a time. And that's really a mistake if you put the CCs on everybody. You got to be really careful how you send out emails to clients if you're trying to impress them about what you've done or whatever. Rather than that, just give them a phone call. Even if all they hear is the voicemail, that's something they'll actually listen to more so than they will read an email. Studies show that we listen more than we read. So that if you do phone calls and leave, even if you're just leaving a voicemail, it will be more effective than some email and all the clutter that they get. Because a lot of people don't get phone calls anymore. They don't. In fact, it drives me nuts is my children, if I leave a voicemail, they don't even keep it up. They don't even listen to it. They just say, oh, I don't listen to voicemails. They call me back. But I think some business people do listen to the voicemails. So even if you can't get them on a phone, a call is better than an email.
Doug, can I just interject real quick and ask, and this may be more of a generational issue, but what are your views on texting clients?
It depends on the individual. If the client is into texting, that seems to be their methodology of communication, then you mirror it. But I would not start a relationship with somebody with texting. I would mirror them. Mirroring is, I don't get into this, but mirroring is very important in establishing a relationship with somebody. You know, and it really comes from an interaction. Mirroring, the idea of mirroring somebody comes from looking into a mirror for yourself and saying, you know, I kind of like that person because it's me. So what you're trying to do is when that person's looking at you, you want to show them you're doing the same behavior that they are, because that's the behavior they like. So if a person uses texting, then I would use texting. If a person uses email, I would use email. If a person likes to talk, then talk throughout it all. But I would not initiate the texting. I wouldn't start a relationship that way because I don't know how they're going to respond to it. And some people hate texting. So use it, but judicious in how you do it. Let's do, you know, the pandemic's over, folks. Get out there, take them out to lunch, see them. But when you take them to lunch, make sure you've got on your agenda the ulterior motive of learning more and more about them, so you can enter into that provision in that section in Outlook and be able to then reiterate that, and not reiterate, regurgitate that in future conversations, so that you make them see that you really care about them as much as their business. Old school. People don't go to lunch as much as they used to. And I look back at old school. I mean, it used to be, we would get cocktails, we would go to dinners, we would go to lunches. There were organizations that would throw these lavish parties in the securities companies and things like that. They're gone, unfortunately. The holiday parties are gone. All that's gone. All the whole school's gone. But most of it's gone means that you have the opportunity to use it in an effective way. So I encourage you to do that. May seem obvious, don't discuss religion or politics, particularly in today's day and age. If the person has a passion for it, then fine. You know, you can have that kind of discussion with them, but be very careful, particularly if there are other people present or other people who might be aware of whatever that discussion is, because it can alienate as many people as it can bring together. In business is not a place for religion and politics. I know some would say that's not right, Doug. We have to, move these big issues forward. But I'm talking business here. And if you're going to focus on business, religion and politics don't belong there. So I'm going to talk about bingo. We all love the game of bingo. I mean, it's been in thousands of movies. We all generate our own bingo cards with our lottery that we buy, whatever. Here's some bingo that might work for you. The first I call is production bingo. And this is a matrix, a simple matrix, where you want to put down the target you have, prospect 1, 2, through whatever it is. And then across the board are the 6 things you're going to do. These are the tactics. So if you look at this from a business planning standpoint, what I'm really doing here is turning a goal on the left-hand vertical column, and across the boxes are the tactics. That's a simple way to do that. And if you have those 5 or 6 prospects, and if over the course of the year you fill in that entire card, bingo, you have a much greater prospect of achieving what you're trying to achieve with respect to that prospect. Production bingo is another one. It should say promotion bingo, so there's a typo there. So promotion bingo is where you put down the role, everybody who's a role in your promotion. That's the senior managers, the office managers, et cetera, whoever it is. And again, you want to contact them, X number of times during the course of the year. Why do you want to do that? You want their brain to know who you are, and that you're more than just some list on a promotion table with some numbers beside it, like billable hours and production, whatever it might be. You want to make sure that has more in their brain than just that. And that's done by letting them know when you did something good, saying hello to them in the hallway, finding a way to communicate with them, finding a way to make them know you more, so that when they make their decisions, either consciously or subconsciously, they know who you are. Because it's a lot easier to make a negative decision with somebody you don't know than it is with somebody you know. So get to know these folks, and if you can fill in this card, again, then bingo, at the end of the year, you may find that you're promoted, which is obviously one of the goals.
Doug, can I just interject a question here? It will help us connect with our final session in May. But in terms of expanding internal network, right? You were an equity partner. You were, someone who was significant in the promotion process. What are things that you have seen Counsel or New Office to expand their network, either in terms of this firm politics or in terms of business development that you thought was really effective? Because oftentimes it can be a little intimidating for people to sort of reach out to people they may not know in this way.
It is intimidating, but it shouldn't be, because I can guarantee you that 90% or more of those with whom you'd want to have contact, whether it's a big producer or somebody in the SMT or whatever it is, they're not going to be offended by you reaching out. They get it. And if, as long as you're reaching out in an appropriate manner to tell them something you have done, to volunteer, to help them with something they're doing, to get involved in some of the interest groups, to do things that are going to show a dimension of you that goes beyond just billing hours and sending out invoices, the more they're going to be appreciative of you, and the more they're going to be prone, both consciously and subconsciously, to believe you ought to advance. So it's awkward. It's like that, like networking was the thing I hated the most. It's kind of the same thing. You don't want to reach out because you feel that you're going to get rejected, or you're going to get people are going to think you're a pain in the ass, or whatever it is. That's not reality. And if there is somebody who doesn't like it, they're going to let you know pretty quick. You just take them off your list. You know, don't bother to tilt at windmills. But the vast majority of people are like it when people reach out to them. If someone would come to me when I was a practice group leader, or better yet, when I was the office manager in New York, when a partner who I didn't know would come to me and ask me something about the office, I felt really good that they felt they were comfortable in coming to me and asking me for my advice on issues that were in the office. The same thing when I was a practice group leader or when I was on the executive committee. I always welcome that kind of outreach. So to build your network internally is really much simpler than your network outside the firm. That takes a lot of effort. The one inside is just listening to people that I have here and just making sure you, your EA, or however you're going to do it, help you accomplish that as a tactical move. They'll welcome it. And again, if they don't, you'll know quickly, and then you just take them off that list. But as long as you do it consistently and respectfully, I would encourage you to do it. Don't be hesitating.
Okay, so we have another question that this kind of points in the direction of expanding your internal network. Garrett Parks has asked, how would you suggest approaching a client you have a strong relationship with to ask them to start making introductions to you for you to their network? For example, asking a GC to facilitate introductions to their peers or folks in their network. So it's a warm relationship. How do you make the ask?
Yeah, the old adage in sales is that the reason most salespeople fail is because they don't ask for the sale after they've met with a person 3 or 4 or 5 times, whatever it is. It's kind of the same concept. It's very awkward to ask, but you've got to sort of maybe get into a role asking. But there are events that can help you do that. For example, a promotion from associate to a counsel. That's where you can say to a person, hey, I want you to know I'm really happy I've been promoted from associate to counsel. And, you know, it's funny, one of the things at the firm, you know, in the criteria in making promotions, they want me to now build a network more and to reach out more. I'd love your help on that, your thoughts on that. You know, engage them to try to become your mentor. And say to them, yeah, I know you've had a great success in business. What, can you help me learn how to do that? Can you, and you can go as far as say, can you introduce me to folks, but they'll understand what you're doing. So use an occasion where you've accomplished something positive to reach out to those people who are closer to you on the client side and say, I'm really happy, I got promoted or I won a case or whatever it is. And then introduce the idea that the firm is you're advancing in the firm, and part of that advancement is increasing your network and how that person might help you. And also, you also want to be able to intertwine in there how you want to help them. So again, I always remember that in your conversations, there should be, whenever you can, there should always be an element of you saying to that person, how can I help you as well? But don't be afraid to ask. It is people have the perception that it's rejected more often than it's accepted. And that's not the case. A lot of it is the approach. For example, if you meet somebody who you know, and the person says to you, can you do me a favor? If they start off the conversation that way, you have to do me a favor. Not a good approach. As opposed to saying, hey, I just got promoted. It's really fascinating how the firm is moving me along. They're asking me to network more and and meet more people. I know you're really good at that. You know, do you have any advice on how I might be able to do that? Is there anybody you know that I ought to meet? You're not asking them for something that's a favor. You're not saying, I want you to do something. You're inviting them into the conversations. It's a small nuance, but it makes all the difference in the world in how you approach somebody. So that they're more looking at, you're more trying to build a relationship with them because you respect them and you want them to hopefully help you in whatever you're going to do. So that's your simple promotion bingo. So in the end of the day, if you want to be a business producer, you got to face something that you're a salesperson. That's what you are. And there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of techniques you can learn. All the law books you read and all the novels you read on weekends, hopefully some of my novels, I encourage you to also read business books. These are a few. There's lots of others out there. And the key to this is when you're reading one of these books, don't expect to get an epiphany. Don't expect to learn something that is going to change your life forever. Most of what you read in these books is very obvious, whatever it is, but hopefully you draw a few nuggets out, 2 or 3 nuggets that you can use in your tactics, you can use in your business planning. Again, always going back to the idea of writing it down and becoming a part of your business plan. These books are great. They're short. They're not relatively easy to read. But you are a salesperson because in the end, it is a book I keep on my desk. Jim, I don't want to make you think I'm a liar. Here it is, right here. It's on my desk all the time. And I not every day, but at least once or twice a week, I'll open it up and I'll read one of the chapters and one of the anecdotes that goes along with it, The Art of War. That's what this is. It's not, with swords and guns and sabers, but it is about winners and losers. And The Art of War is all about having a strategy and executing tactics towards a victory. That's the same thing we're talking here in business planning. In fact, some schools say that this book is the very first book and the most important book on business planning. You can read it and decide for yourself. It's a pretty fascinating read. So thank you. I'm happy to take some more questions. And unabashedly, I'll promote my new book that's coming out next week on May 1st. This is the official publication date. And it goes into a lot more detail on some of the things that I've talked about today, and also goes on the other end of the practice of your evolution through law and how to deal with the inevitable of retiring and giving your practice away. So having done that and been there, my ego said I got to write a book, so I wrote a book. And if you enjoy it, great. So anyway, I'm happy to take any kind of questions or whatever if in the time we have remaining. Joe, it's over to you.